Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. And who am I here with?
You are here with Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com.
And we are not the MD type or the PhD type, just for legality's sake.
I come bearing gifts.
Bring it on.
I read an article this morning that I thought of you, because you come up with these like really smart, pithy quotes, and then you write about them and talk about them, and then we discuss it together. And this morning I read one of those quotes. I was like, oh, Glenn's going to like this. So I know you haven't had time to be articulate about it, but we're going to be hopefully articulate about on the fly.
I'll do my best. Bring it on.
Yeah, this is an article. I originally read this. I found it, I was going through my old Evernote, which I haven't looked at in years. This is at least 5-6 years old, but it was just updated. And it's by a writer named Brianna Wiest, who I know nothing about. But the headline is about self-care, and it's not all salt baths and chocolate cake. And I'll give you the first couple of lines. It says, self-care is often a very unbeautiful thing. It's making a spreadsheet of your debt and enforcing a morning routine and cooking yourself healthy meals and no longer running from your problems and calling the distraction a solution. It's often doing the ugliest thing that you have to do, like sweat through another workout or tell a toxic friend that you don't want to see them anymore or get a second job so you can have a savings account, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she says, true self-care is not salt bath and chocolate cake. It is making the choice to build a life you don't need to regularly escape from.
Oh, I love that.
There was the mic drop. I said, oh, Glenn, I want to give you this one. True self-care is making the choice to build a life you don't need to regularly escape from. So over to you, good buddy.
I'm not sure what more I can say than amen. I think that's absolutely true. So the thing is, I don't feel like I need to escape from the workouts and the food prep and the journaling and I like doing the work of self-growth and self-actualization. But I tell you what, it's kind of funny. In the animal kingdom, animals' play evolves into their work. There's not this dichotomy between play and work. The kitty cat who is fishing in the toilet bowl is actually practicing for killing real fish when it gets older, because that's going to be its job. When your dog is shaking a stick back and forth, it's actually practicing the hunt and the kill, which is going to be its job later on. And there's just this natural evolution. But in our society, we've created work as something that's not necessarily the natural evolution of play. I recently started dating a woman who is an employee. And I'm kind of jealous in some ways because at 5 o'clock she leaves and her day is over. And I realize she thinks about the weekends very differently than I think about the weekends. Like the weekends come and I think, oh, good, less people are going to bother me. I get to work on this project.
Yeah.
She thinks, oh, good, Glenn will take me to the beach, or we just kind of started dating. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what she thinks, but it's very clear to me that it's a different life than what I have. I had this observation about work and play very early in my career, and I decided that I wanted my work to evolve from what I played at. And for the most part, I still feel like that. I feel like I'm playing. It's hard for me to believe that people pay me for it. I wish they'd pay me a little more lately because it feels a little too much like play. not quite enough like profit. But even so, it's really evolved into something I very much enjoy and that I would pay other people to get to do. I don't think I'd have it any other way. It's definitely a life that I don't want to escape from. I spent a good deal of money and time and life energy setting up my life so I could live on the beach. I'm looking at the ocean waves as we speak and the palm trees blowing in the breeze. And yes, it's 412 degrees in Florida, and that's not a fun part. But, for the most part, I've really set up my life as something that I don't want to escape from. And I've got a hot yoga studio, and I've got a gym down the road. And, I've got good friends like you that I talk to every week. And why do I have to escape? As a matter of fact, when I go on a quote unquote vacation or trip, I always find I'm looking forward to getting back to my life. I'm thinking, oh, only 2 more days here and then I get to go back home. I think those were good decisions. I think that it definitely sets up a situation where I get regular hits of dopamine throughout my day without having to eat junk to do that. I have a balance throughout the day of relaxation versus work. And in kind of a strange way, like sometimes I'll go for a long walk on the beach and I'll take some recordings that I'm planning on publishing and I have to listen through and get to the best clips. I mean, technically I'm actually working, but it doesn't feel like work. So I'm always looking for ways that I can make my work more fun, integrate more relaxation and play into my work. And then I just don't have this dichotomy in my head. That's my answer to that. What do you think?
I was thinking we were going to take it in a food related direction. So it's really interesting to me that we're kind of shifted over to sort of personal reflections. I think there is a tremendous power in letting our play become our work. That's not available to a lot of people. There's a lot of people who have the opportunity to do it, who have the privilege, the means, the skills, and for whatever reason, fear of not making enough money or fear of disappointing other people in our lives or, parental ancestral obligations, or just discovering that we're good at stuff that isn't necessarily what we're passionate about. You talked about this new girlfriend being an employee. Like, how many employees feel like they get to play at work, that anybody cares what they care about, what they're passionate about, what their purpose is in life, what really lights them up? And you figure any company of any size has enough different roles that it could get everybody into a position where they were just like totally jazzed and they didn't need more vacation days and they didn't need to feel like, if I don't get more money, I'm leaving. I don't know how we create a world in which all of us can fully bring our gifts, but that's not to say that if we have the opportunity, we shouldn't, because it's the first step in creating that world is to create visible role models of what it's like to make work your play.
I want to say a couple of things. First of all, this is my life after 60 years of working at it. So it's not like I had the idea and then the next day I revamped my whole life and everything was great. Each little piece and part of that was something I had to work out. I had to develop the skills and discipline to work out every day. I had to work on my eating. I had to figure out how I was going to deal with my family and friends while I moved to Florida to live on the beach. There was thing after thing, and at every point there were obstacles and resistance. But because I knew this was the goal, I kept taking another step in that direction, and my life felt more and more like that as time went on. The other thing I have to say is this very much does have to do with food, because the screw it, just do it response where people, they have the best of rational intents and they really mean to commit to their dietary rules, but then they find themselves saying, oh, I don't care, I just want to do this instead. Screw it, just do it. That seems to be driven by a sense of organismic distress and by a search for dopamine and serotonin on a lot of different levels. Like if your life is set up so that you're miserable 12 hours a day, then your food monster is going to have a lot more appeal when it says, come on, that chocolate bar is the only pleasure you're going to get today, right? But if you know that you're going to be going for a 20-minute walk outside in nature, or you know you have your yoga class tonight, or you recognize you're going to have that half hour to journal and kind of get your head straight and put yourself in a more mindful, self-reflective state of mind later on, then you can get your dopamine in those ways. It's not as tempting to eat all the other food. So half of overcoming overeating is fixing your thinking, but the other half is self-regulating your life. So I think it very much has to do with food, is set up a life that you don't feel like you have to escape from.
Mm. And if I could, indulge in some conspiratorial thinking, the companies that make money off of our addictions, whether to food or drugs or internet, social media, or whatever, don't have any interest in helping us lead self-regulated lives of joy, passion, purpose.
Right.
You talk about this a lot. There's not a group of people sitting, evil people sitting in a boardroom somewhere, like rubbing their hands and cackling, orchestrating our misery, but there doesn't have to be.
Right. Because we're hardwired to go for the short-term gratification. Resources were so scarce, and it was so necessary in our evolution that we grabbed them as soon as we could. Like, we didn't have the luxury of thinking about how are we going to set up a life of leisure and play and craft our work exactly the way that we wanted to. Our job was probably to find food, and we were probably at it a good portion of the day. And so our physiology is set up to grab those resources and engage in those automated habit loops, which unfortunately are often antithetical to setting up a life that you don't want to escape from.
Yeah, it's funny. As you said that, I just started scribbling a note to myself because that we're hardwired to short-term gratification. I'm working on workshops for organizations around conflict. My angle on it, there's a zillion and one different techniques for conflict management, conflict resolution. And the trouble is they're all dependent on our hardware. It's like giving somebody who is unregulated a technique for active listening and curiosity is like trying to download Google Earth onto a 1984, Macintosh SE.
Yeah.
If we can't understand, like, why do I always have this reaction when conflict comes up, whatever this reaction is, whether it's to get angry, to bristle, to withdraw, to become disengaged, to be resentful, whatever it is, we're hardwired to short-term gratification. And whatever state that is, it's gratifying in some way, right? Whether it's making us the victim or it's allowing us to feel powerful through anger. So it's the same sort of thing, just like we can get seduced by food if we don't have enough regulation and other sources of dopamine and the other happy chemicals, we can get into our behavioral addictions as well.
And the longer I do what I do, the more people that I work with, the more I realize you have to start really, really small. You can't download it all onto that 1984 Macintosh. But what you can do is every time before you eat anything, just go 1, 2, 3, right? You can start to open up a space between stimulus and response. You can start to change that reactivity into proactivity. And it doesn't have to be a monumental set of, studying this course or taking this program or spending 5 years contemplating your navel by the river. It can just be saying 1, 2, 3, before you eat, before you react to that colleague at work, before you start an important conversation with your wife. 1, 2, 3.
I love that so much because I've been struggling all week with the workshop design because I see, like, I open the door and like everything I know wants to rush in. Yesterday, what I came up with was that the first workshop has to teach people strategies for just acknowledging that this is how it is and slowing down, right? So the first thing is, before the conflict, what are some things I can do to prepare my nervous system so that it's a little bit more resilient, so that the conflict doesn't take me into the red zone, but maybe, it takes me up to 8 or 9, but not up to 11. And starting there before going into, well, how do we revamp the hardwiring? How do we update the map? How do we install the new motherboard and processor and sound card and video graphics processor?
Because the difference between doing one tiny small thing proactively and not doing it is a difference between feeling like you're the master of your impulses versus you're the slave to your impulses. It's really the difference between winning and losing the game. It's a whole different way of life. And most people feel like they have to make such radical changes that they build it up in their head into this mountain that they're never going to climb. So if you can figure out what that very one simple, tiny, small thing you can do is, that will just begin to move the needle from reactivity to proactivity. I think that's the foundation of winning the game.
It's terrific.
Cool.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.